It's Friday night again, and even though I got home late, my wife Victoria came home even later. I wasn't too happy that she went out with her friends after work, but hey, every couple needs some time away from each other, right? Vicky was nice enough to let me know when she was heading out and where they were going, and she made sure to come back early. She usually got home by 8 in the evening. Today, I was at a work meeting when I got a text from Vicky. Me and 3 buddies are grabbing a drink, so I'll be home late, babe. Vicky always looks good when she goes out, which is like once every few weeks. I don't know why it bugs me so much, but I guess I just have some trust issues. I find it hard to trust people, especially if they're hanging out at a bar without their partner or traveling for work a lot. And Vicky does both, but the traveling is the main thing. Yo, the toughest thing for me, you might be wondering why I have all these issues and how they mess with my view of Vicky. Let me tell you a little sad story so you can understand. I basically grew up in a bar, like literally. My folks owned and ran the hottest bar in our little town outside of St. Louis, Missouri. They also ran a fancy French restaurant in the other part of the building. People would come from all over to eat there and then head next door to the bar to party all night. I saw all of this growing up, and from a young age my parents instilled in me the importance of responsibility. Man, I remember when I was 16 and my parents were all like, you gotta learn how to work in business. My older brother and sister started working in the family business when they were 16 too. By the time I started, my brother was 21 and already had a degree in hotel and restaurant management, running a bar. My sister was almost 19 and just starting college. I couldn't work in the bar because I was too young, so they had me waiting tables at the restaurant. I was so mad about it, like typical teenager stuff. I just wanted to hang out with my friends, run around the streets, and make easy money without working too much, preferably in a place where I could flirt with a bunch of hot girls. I had only been at the restaurant for 3 weeks when my mindset started to shift. Oh my God, I saw so many boobs that I thought I was going blind. I also saw a ton of those sexy little black dresses multiple times. My parents had to come to the door separating the bar. Yo, so I was at the restaurant where my sister works, right? And she comes up to me all serious like, Donnie, get back to work and don't pay attention to anything else or you'll get in trouble. And I'm like, but sis, Mrs. Horton is here with some dude and she ain't even wearing underwear. Does Mr. Horton know? Man, I can't wait to tell the guys about this juicy gossip. Sarah looked shook and glanced around before whispering under her breath. Oh shit, around that time I felt my dad's big hand on my shoulder. He squeezed it tight and said, Don, come with me right now. He turned and walked through the dining room, past the waiters and into his office. I followed him slowly, honestly feeling scared. That night, I was sent back to work enough to know I was in for a serious chat with my dad. When I entered the office, he looked at me and said, close the door and sit down. I thought, oh damn, this is gonna be real bad. I almost turned and ran. Man, I was totally caught off guard when I was sitting there, watching my dad stare at me. He finally let out a sigh and said, Don, I should have had a chat with you about all this before letting you start working here, but I just didn't. I had to have the same talk with your siblings, and let me tell you, it doesn't get any easier with repetition. Then out of nowhere, my dad goes, Mrs. Horton is a looker, ain't she, son? I was so taken aback, I jumped a bit and felt a bit lightheaded. I was wondering where my dad was going with this question and why he changed the subject while I was still trying to figure it out. To come up with my response, he asked again, right? I gulped and nodded yes while quietly saying, uh-huh. Dad leaned in, elbows on the table, fingers intertwined, resting his chin on his thumbs. I still remember his sigh and sad expression. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and spoke again. I can still hear his words even 20 years later. He said, this business is everything to us. It supports the whole family, gives us our beautiful home and pool, sent your brother to college, and will send your sister and you too. So, college is gonna keep us afloat for a while, as long as we don't mess it up. Dawn, if someone you recognize shows up with their fam, just give M a friendly nod and call M by name. You can chat with M while you're working if the customer is cool with it. But, listen up, in this line of work, you gotta have selective hearing and vision. Being in the food and bar industry means you gotta keep things on the down low. If you see or hear something you shouldn't, just act like you didn't. And if someone you know comes in with a date, keep it on the DL. If someone ain't part of the fam, you gotta address them as sir or unless they say otherwise. You gotta pretend like you don't remember them being here or anything they did or wore. If our customers do something sketchy, we just look the other way and keep it on the DL. All the staff gotta follow the same strict rules. If I ever catch anyone gossiping about a customer, they are getting the boot. I've had to let go of some really good employees over the years because of this. Listen, the reason they got in trouble was because they couldn't keep their mouths shut about our clients. We are known for being discreet and having top-notch food and service. I get it, you're young and your hormones are going crazy. Shoot, even at my age, I still check out women like Mrs. Horton. Your mom knows that I do it, and she knows that you'll do it too. But she also knows it's just like window shopping, you look but you don't touch. I don't expect you to not look, but I do expect you to be low-key and not make it so obvious like you did tonight. Hey, son, one thing you gotta understand is that nosy people like Mrs. Horton always get found out. The gossip starts somewhere and eventually makes its way back to her husband. If he's like most guys, it could end their marriage. Cheaters always slip up eventually and their spouse finds out. We don't want to be the ones starting that kind of drama. A lot of them have kids, and divorce really messes them up. So get back to work and remember what I told you. I went back to my job that day and just kept working. I worked at a restaurant on and off during high school and college. I never talked shit about customers, but I saw a lot of shady stuff for someone my age. As I got older and started working at a bar, I would see groups of guys or girls coming to parties. I witnessed married people doing things that definitely wouldn't fly in a committed relationship. Maybe I learned too much, because I also became less tolerant of people who stayed out late at these parties. I realized that a lot of the folks at these parties were just not faithful in their relationships. So basically, we were at a work event just having a good time and trying to hit on some locals. It's all good if they are single, but a lot of them were actually married or at least had a ring on their finger. And in a lot of cases, they ended up hooking up with some of our married clients. I learned to lose respect and be disgusted by them, but still treated them all with politeness and discretion. At the end of the day, we just wanted to make sure our business was successful. I noticed that the ones who came to the parties and left early after a drink or two had good, solid marriages. But the ones who stayed late, man, my parents had some messed up marriages and a bunch of them ended in divorce when I was in my first year of college. My dad ended up hiring this new waitress named Victoria, and let me tell you, the moment I laid eyes on her, I was smitten. We worked together for the next couple of years and ended up falling in love. We got to meet each other's families and relatives, had deep conversations, and realized we were totally on the same wavelength. We used to watch all the shady people who came into the bar and just crack up at their ridiculous behavior. Then, right before Christmas, before we were supposed to graduate from college, I popped the question to Vicky. And well, the rest is history. I knew me and Vicky were on the same page about life and would be together forever. The only issue was our parents wanting us to sign a prenup. We both thought it was dumb. My parents had a business and a big investment that they wanted to protect in case I inherited it. Shockingly, Vicky's parents wanted the same thing. They had a huge fortune and didn't want me to get any of it if we split up. The agreement we signed sorted out all these issues. We agreed that whatever we had before getting married or inherited from our moms would stay with us if we split up. It also said we'd each keep our own pensions. The only thing we split was stuff we bought together after getting hitched. It even talked about what would happen with the kids if we broke up and one of us was away a lot. The parent who traveled less would have custody unless there was a problem. Dude, the day of graduation finally came and Vicky got her bachelor's degree in finance and scored a sweet job at a local brokerage firm. I got my bachelor's in construction management with a minor in landscape architecture and worked for a construction company for a couple years to learn the ropes. Neither of us were into the whole restaurant or bar scene, so my parents turned it into a corporation and let my sister and brother run it. Mom stayed on as the accountant and Dad was just a typical dad. He called the shots even if it wasn't official. After working for another company for 2 years, I decided to start my own construction and landscaping business. Since Vicky and I were struggling to pay for our house and cars, my parents basically fronted the money for our family business. I got a salary to run it, and it was tough at first. But Vicky worked her way up the ladder, and one day she came home ecstatic because she got a job at the brokerage company. Compliance department is the one that makes sure all the satellite offices follow the Securities and Exchange Commission rules. The only downside is that her new job involves some travel, not too much, just 3 or 4 days a month. But I'm concerned about my previous overtime. As my business expanded, I went from small remodeling gigs to adding rooms and garages to constructing entire new buildings and landscaping them. I was content with this setup, so I never attempted to move my business elsewhere. So like working for the company, they just kept giving me fatter paychecks as the business kept making more money. I eventually got used to Vicky going on trips, but I never really felt cool with it. I wasn't thrilled about her going out with her friends at night, but she only did it like once a month and she always came back home. By 8 p.m., I had to head home. But I would also have to travel sometimes, and I'd often grab a beer with the construction crews or office staff after work. It's just good management, you know. But I always made sure to leave after a couple of drinks. I'd usually get back home not too late, even if I was meeting with my employees. Unless, of course, Vicky came with me. After being married for 3 years, Vicky and I decided to have kids. Our first child was Patrick, and 18 months later, my little Suzanne arrived. She was so tiny, and as she grew up, she had that kind of control over me by the time she was 4 years old. She was like a mini version of her mom. As she got older, she became a pro at handling tough situations in the office. She could spot problems and knew exactly how to fix them. If she faced any pushback, she wasn't scared to call out the culprit. And if that didn't work, she wouldn't hesitate to escalate it to headquarters and use some more force. A lot of office managers knew her as the go-to person for getting things done. Me and Vicky used to work together, but then she left to find a new job. Because of this, Vicky started traveling more often, sometimes being away for up to 2 weeks a month. I didn't like it, and neither did she. We talked about it, and she thought she was on track to take over the department in less than 2 years. Then she wouldn't have to travel anymore and would get a big pay raise. We agreed to keep going with the same attitude, waiting for that opportunity. But because of the bad economy, my small company had to start looking for jobs we would have turned down before because of the housing market. And then the stock market tanked. We had to lay off half our employees. We weren't in too deep financially since we didn't have big loans or high expenses, but we weren't making as much money as before. One of the small gigs I applied for ended up ruining my marriage. I regret taking that job so much. Maybe if I hadn't taken it, I could have stayed happily married. Or maybe not. I walked into my office on Thursday morning, questioning why I even bothered coming in. I had stayed late the night before to finish up all the paperwork. Hey, my desk buddy Vicky has been MIA all week for some boring compliance testing. I finally caught up with her and found out she won't be back until late Friday evening. So, I decided to put in some work this morning. I was tempted to head straight to one of our work sites to get my hands dirty and check out the progress. You know, the best way to keep employees in check and make sure the work is top-notch is for the boss to be right there with them, giving their all. But, before I could settle in at my desk, my assistant called me up. She was like, "Don, we keep things pretty chill around here. I like to treat my employees like they are part of the fam. Mrs. Sloan is here and she wants to chat about getting a deck and landscaping done in her backyard. Can you swing by and see her?" I was thinking just a cute little porch and some shrubs, but I figured I'd hear her out anyway. A few days of work could be good and help some guys put food on the table for their families. When Mrs. Sloan walked into my office, I was taken aback. I was almost at a loss for words. She looked so much like Mrs. Horton, the first lady I had a major crush on, that I could hardly talk. So I got my act together and got up to say hi to her. I smiled and said, "Mrs. Sloan, nice to meet you. I'm Don Patterson. Mrs. Simpson told me you're looking to build a porch, is that right?" "Oh, my bad," I said. "Please have a seat while we chat about what you need. I don't usually do this, but you remind me so much of a lady I knew when I was younger." It was like she just walked into the room. "Sorry about that." Mrs. Sloan laughed and then said, "Don, it's me, Jasmine." I guess she saw the confusion on my face. Hey, remember when Jasmine Horton, Donita, and Alfred Horton were my folks? We used to hang out at your family's restaurant all the time. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, you were just a kid back then and you've grown up so much. Jasmine laughed that sexy little laugh of hers and said, well, I guess we've all changed a bit. I was only 10 when my parents split up and she took me in. We couldn't afford to eat at your place anymore. After a sigh, Jasmine started again. Anyway, my husband and I bought a house not too far from where we used to hang out. So, this guy I used to live by says we could add a porch and a house with a jacuzzi. I reckon we could get in on it too if the prices ain't too steep. When I heard you were in the construction biz, I just had to see if you'd be down before asking anyone else. We spent the whole morning reminiscing about the good old days and chatting about what she and her husband Stephen had in mind. Once we had a general idea of what she wanted, I mentioned that I'd need to check out the house and take some measurements before giving an offer. But she shut me down. Hey Don, no worries, we can go out now or whenever works for you. I'm free all day, so just let me know. How about I swing by around 1 o'clock this afternoon? I need to check on my crew, grab some food, and then I'll have all day to measure and give you an estimate. Sound good to you? Jasmine just left the office, so I'm following her. I told Laura, my secretary, that I won't be back until later. I'm heading out to check on the job sites and grab a bite to eat. Hey, after work, swing by Mrs. Sloane's place to check out her little project. Just give me a shout on my cell if you need anything. Work was going fine, but I ended up staying longer than planned to meet with a property owner. This made me late for lunch, and I didn't get to Mrs. Sloane's until around 1:30. Jasmine greeted me at the door, and the first thing I did was apologize for being late. Mrs. Sloane, I'm sorry I'm late. I tried calling you, but only got your voicemail. Mrs. Sloane just chuckled and, Hey, I'm Jasmine, sorry I missed your call earlier. I was cleaning the pool and totally forgot my phone inside. Now that you are here, want a drink or maybe want to check out the area? Nah, I'm good, let's just go check out your backyard. I took all the measurements and it should be easy to estimate everything I need, but you really should consider getting a hot tub. Hey, before I can give you a price, I need to know the dimensions of the bathroom so I can order the materials we need. Oh, Jasmine mentioned that she thought we would also provide the bathtub. I don't know much about them, so can't we just include that in the quote too? I chuckled and said, yes, Jasmine, I can do that, but we don't sell bathtubs. I'll have to buy it elsewhere. So, I need to know what size you want and if it will be built-in or freestanding. Also, will it work on 210 or 110 volts? Jasmine looked. I was so upset that it felt like a weight off my chest. I remembered when she was younger how she would get so worked up over small things. Finally, I said, let's talk about it for a bit and then maybe you can call your husband or talk to him about it tonight. I can wait to decide what kind of bath you want. Jasmine looked really worried now, she was almost shaking as she said, oh no, I can't call him about this. He told me to handle it and that's what I'm going to do. He's on a business trip in Denver so I won't see him until then. Hey, maybe this weekend we can figure out this thing. I asked Jasmine more about how they use the bathroom and found out that they don't really have guests over. In fact, she's the one who mostly uses the pool and backyard. Occasionally, 1 or 2 friends come over to hang out. After getting all the info I needed, we went to my supplier and Jasmine chose a smaller bathtub for 5 people. I took the measurements and we headed back to her place. I asked if she had a spot where I could connect to the internet. Hey, so I had to grab some stuff for budgeting at work on Thursday, but things changed last minute. I wanted to get a price list sorted before I got down to business. Jasmine was cool about it and told me to come into the office. Steve, who representatives for Saving Business Systems, has a sick office. He can work from home when he's not traveling. You can hook up your laptop to our network portal or use one of our computers. When I walked in, I was blown away by how he had it all set up. A typical office in a building, his desk was on the left as you walked in. The windows looked out onto the backyard, with 2 fancy leather chairs in front of the desk and a bookshelf on the other side. I was impressed. Jasmine came over, pulled out a chair, smiled, and said, you can sit here while you work. If you need anything, just ask. Thank you, I replied, walking over to the desk. I set up my laptop and sat down. Jasmine handed me a DSL cable to connect to my computer as I got settled. Yo, I had to grab the photo, right? I was staring at it, then I hesitated and stared at my hand before finally picking it up. Jasmine looked at me all puzzled and handed me the cord. She noticed my expression and how tightly I was holding the photo and asked me, "Hey, is everything okay? This is my man, my pride and joy. I keep telling him to get rid of this pic and get a new one from his phone, but he's stubborn. I'm sick of seeing his ex-girlfriend every time I sit at the desk, you know. Don't stare at me like that, what's up?" Jasmine asked again. I quietly put the photo back and stepped away from the table. I glanced at Jasmine and questioned, "Didn't you mention your husband was in Denver?" She seemed taken aback and replied, "Yeah, I did." "Why do you ask?" I responded, "Well, my wife is in Denver and she's been there all week." "Jasmine, did you ask Stephen where to get a quote, or did you say you were coming to me?" She shook her head and said, "Does it really matter? He just told me that if I wanted a deck and a hot tub, he could sort it out. So, he said I could go ahead as long as it didn't cost more than $220,000. Why are you asking all these questions, Jasmine? The woman in the photo with Steve is actually my wife." Jasmine just smiled and said, "Oh, it's weird that you married Steve's ex-girlfriend. We've only been married for 18 months, when did you guys get married?" My stomach turned as I looked back at Jasmine. "Vicky and I have been married for 9 years. This photo was taken no more than 2 years ago because it's of a necklace I bought for Christmas. Like, more than 2 years ago, she bought this cute outfit that she's gonna rock on her vacay next summer." Jasmine just stood there for a second then was like, "Don, I kinda feel bad for you if what I'm thinking is true. But, like, why are you stressing about her being in Denver? You said you've been married for 18 months, so do you even know when this pic was taken?" From what I remember of what Vicky was wearing in the pic, it was probably taken around the time you tied the knot. So, like, when did Steve even have time to frame it? And why did he say it can't be from that time if the pic was taken then? The day he won the top prize at the big Chevrolet car show in the state, Jasmine started crying and sat down in one of the comfy chairs in front of the desk. She kept saying quietly, "It was 3 weeks before we got married, I just never thought. I mean, he said it was an old photo, but he was holding the first place trophy, damn him." "Jasmine, wait," Don said, "let's think about everything carefully. I saw all this while working at a restaurant. I learned to mind my own business and not gossip about others because people can be shady. All right, so basically, Steve and Vicky were caught hugging in front of his car in a photo from about 18 months to 2 years ago. You're younger than us, so I doubt Steve could be Vicky's ex, since we started dating when we were 18 and worked at my dad's restaurant. But hey, who knows, he might be. I know all the people she used to crush on when she was younger, probably more than you do. Steve, how old is he?" "He's 29 and I'm 27. "Well, it makes sense because Vicky isn't even 31 yet. I have no clue what to do now. If we ask them about it, they'll just deny it, whether they had an affair in the past or not. If they are having an affair and we ask, they might run away or become even more secretive. I feel like I need to ask, but up until now, I would have said I trusted Vicky completely. I just don't know." We talked some more and then. So, we thought we had a pretty solid plan. We decided not to spill the beans about what we found out that day to anyone, especially not Steve. Jasmine promised not to spill the tea about our chat to him. Instead, we decided to hire a private eye to snoop on Vicky and Steve. The next day, Jasmine and I got in touch with the security company we usually use for our construction sites. They hooked us up with a detective agency they work with. After chatting with their team, we signed a contract for their services. Each of us cut a check for our share of the upfront payment and headed home. Jasmine was eager to get this show on the road. So, I put a fake name on the check just in case Steve asked. I could say it was a deposit for the job we were discussing and that I was using a business account. Vicky never saw any checkbooks or receipts, so I was in the clear. I might just have to pay some damages to the business later on. 3 weeks later, Jasmine and I met with the investigator. He said, "Don Jasmine, I'm sorry, but this is all wrong. I'm happy to say that we couldn't find anything to indicate that your spouses are dating or even know each other. We watched them every afternoon, and after that, they were at work and didn't do anything they weren't supposed to. The only weird thing that happened was last Friday when Mrs. Patterson and some of the women she works with went out after work. They went to a few bars in St. Louis and danced with some guys. Vicky danced with Steve once, but it was fine, there was space between them and they didn't let their hands wander. There was no kissing or anything sketchy. No one else saw them talking to each other after the dance. I saw it all and leaned back in my chair. I checked out the investigator and then glanced over at Jasmine. I was starting to think that all this chaos was because of my built-in distrust from my time working in the family business. We went through all the phone records, put up cameras and voice recorders in the house, and even had them in Vicky's car and purse. Everything was clean as a whistle. Finally, I just sighed and said, I guess we can just say I was being paranoid. You have no idea how relieved I am to know this, but I feel so embarrassed for even thinking that Vicky and Steve were involved. Wait, why would anyone do that? Let's just put a stop to this. Hold up, Jasmine, didn't you say Steve was heading to San Antonio next week? Jasmine looked confused, then replied, yeah, why? What's that got to do with anything? Oh, we won't need to watch anyone next week, will we? I think this is the exact time we should be keeping an eye on them. Vicky mentioned 2 weeks ago that she had a compliance check planned for next week. I can't remember exactly where she said she was going, but I think it was Austin, Texas. In these cities, they stop maybe only an hour apart. We've pretty much figured out they don't hang around here. I think we should check next time to see if they are legit. If they come out clean, I'll admit I was acting like a paranoid idiot. Even though we saw it in the photo, it's reasonable to think that if they were old pals, Vicky would have let him take a pic of her with him and his trophy despite all the uncertainty. While Jasmine and I were snooping around, we didn't notice any changes in how Vicky or Steve were treating us. They were just the same as always. I tried to figure out if Vicky was acting different from when we were dating or right after we got married. She still treated me like I was the only guy in the world, coming to me for sex whenever I wanted, just like before. She was still loving and attentive, just like she always was. This was all happening on the Friday night before Vicky's. Next time we went out, we had dinner on a date. Later that night, when we were all cozy in bed, I asked Vicky if she remembered working at Dad's restaurant and laughing at all the cheaters and people doing shady stuff. I thought I sensed a bit of tension in Vicky's muscles, but I couldn't be sure. She just smiled and turned to me, saying, yeah, some of those people were real idiots. Every now and then, when I see someone pulling a stunt at work, I think back to those days. Can you believe how dumb they were? I mean, why even bother asking? Anyway, one of the guys from work thinks his wife might be cheating on him, but he hasn't got any solid proof yet. When he told me about his worries, it brought back memories for me. I just told him to chill out and keep an eye and ear out for anything suspicious. I said that cheaters always get caught eventually. I also advised him to take his time sorting things out, especially for the sake of his kids, because divorce is always tough on them. Vicky seemed a bit down and asked, why do you automatically assume that marriage is gonna end in divorce for sure? Maybe the wife actually loves her husband and the affair doesn't mean anything to her. She doesn't want a divorce, oh no. Vicky, he's just like us. He's used to seeing people in bars and has a low tolerance for cheating like we do. I can't picture him just going along with a long-term affair like you or I would. I think he might be down for a one-night stand, but definitely not a fling. Vicky got tense again when I said I wouldn't agree to a long-term thing. Me and my wife were having a serious chat about our relationship, but then she suddenly smiled at me and kissed me softly. She said, I'm glad you're still the man I married. We both know how messy affairs can be and the heartache they bring. If he's really going through some stuff, maybe we can help him snap out of it. Good night, my love. Vicky and I cuddled up in bed and eventually drifted off to sleep, although we were tossing and turning a lot and couldn't fall asleep quickly. The following week was tough for me. I even called investigators twice. I checked in to see if they found anything, but all they said was our detectives are watching them both. They said they'll have a report for me next Monday. Monday finally came and Jasmine and I met at the investigator's office. When we sat down, we could tell he had some bad news. The investigator leaned back in his chair and said, "You know, when you asked us to follow your partners last week, I almost told you it would be a waste of money. This was one of the toughest cheating partner cases we've ever dealt with. But you were right, Steve. So, apparently Vicky and are messing around behind our backs. We've got pics and recordings to back it up. I gotta admit, I'm pretty shocked. If we had just stopped snooping after we followed them here to St. Louis, we never would have uncovered this mess in the Lewis area. From the convos we caught on tape, it seems like they only hook up 3 or 4 times a year in cities far away from here. And even then, they act like they just randomly ran into each other in town and make a big effort to look like old pals. But what we discovered was, there were these 2 sneaky backstabbers who ended up in different cities and hotels, but somehow managed to meet up at a third hotel. They didn't even stay in the same room, they rented separate rooms with an adjoining door. Steve was slick and paid for his room in cash to cover his tracks, while Vicky went by the alias Angela Foster and used a credit card with a Washington, Missouri address. She had a government ID with the same fake name. Steve checked in as Stephen Allen, keeping things low-key. Government ID for ID purposes only. They only rented these rooms from Tuesday to Thursday. They didn't stay long and only saw each other on those 2 days. I leaned back in my chair and thought, I remember Vicky's maiden name is Victoria Angela Foster. Jasmine mentioned that Allen is actually Steve's middle name. I sighed, I think it's all over except for the tears. I'll talk to a divorce lawyer as soon as I can set up an appointment. Jasmine was about to say something when the investigator interrupted, saying, "Hold on. Man, that's not even the half of it. Normally I wouldn't even bring it up, but this time I just can't shake the feeling that something shady is going on. I mean, I know they hooked up, but it doesn't feel like a casual thing. It's like they were playing some sort of twisted game. We've got hours of recorded conversations and most of them are innocent enough. There were only 2 times they got it on the whole week, and the pillow talk was just weird. Here, let me play you a tape to show you what I mean." When the investigator played the tape, "Okay, so Vicky was like, Steve, I think it's time we end this thing we've been doing for 6 years now. We've had fun and all, but let's face it, having sex with each other is just not as good as with our significant others. Plus, something Don said on Friday night has been bugging me. He brought up that old saying about how all cheaters eventually get caught. So yeah, I think it's time we call it quits. Nobody ever thinks about all the choices. In the end, all cheaters either get too cocky or slip up and get caught. I'm still stressing about Denver. It was the first time we both went to the same city, and I still think it was a mistake. We shouldn't have switched up the plan. We should only meet up when we can go to different cities close enough to each other that we can meet in the middle like we do here now. I know it's a pain to rent 2 rooms and pay for one we don't use, but I still think we should. We've shown that we are smart cheaters, and if you're smart about it, you can cheat and win. I really don't want to do anything that could make me lose Dawn. I love him so much, he's the best guy I've ever met. Honestly, after we first got together, the only real thrill I got out of all this was planning and scheming. I can spend hours planning and thinking about deceiving, getting documents, booking a room, and organizing a trip. It's better than solving a crossword puzzle. Sudoku is so boring, it's killing me. Don't act tough, I know you feel the same way. You told me in Denver that you always go back to your hotel feeling unsatisfied." The investigator stopped the recording and then said there's more to it. That was the weirdest part of our conversation. I just can't figure out why the investigator stopped and gave me a weird look as I started laughing. Finally, I composed myself and said, "Sorry, I don't find it funny at all, I'm actually really mad. Man, there's something in this convo that I gotta fill you in on. A few years back, a couple we knew, Vicky and me, they split up. Turns out, his wife was cheating on him and got caught. She had been fooling around behind his back for almost 4 years before she got busted. And she tried to play it off like it was just a small slip-up. The night we found out about the affair and the divorce, we were chilling with some other friends and got into a talk about lies and shady stuff that people do. Remember when my dad used to say stuff when we were working at the restaurant? And all the crazy stuff we saw there. Vicky was going on about how anyone could get away with cheating as long as they were careful and slick. I was arguing the opposite, saying there's no way they could keep it up forever. Eventually, they'll slip up and get caught, even if it takes years. I told her that even if the cheating starts off small, it always ends up coming out in the end. And we were determined to stick to our guns, but for a few weeks Vicky kept talking about how smart cheaters always come out on top. I remember her affair with Steve starting around the same time we had an argument. Vicky has always been proud of her intelligence, and now I think I hit a nerve when we discussed this novel. I think she was trying to show that she could pull it off and not get caught. Maybe she could have if she had stopped sooner, but now she's not going to get away with it. Me and Jasmine are back together this time, and we're waiting for her to face the music. So, we decided to meet up with a divorce lawyer after splitting the costs of the investigator. When I walked into the office, the lawyer looked shocked. He said, "Mr. and Mrs. Patterson." I grinned and replied, "No sir, I'm Don Patterson and this is Jasmine Owen. We found out that her husband and my wife were cheating on us, so we split the investigator's bill to gather dirt on them. Now we figured we might as well split your fee too." Lawyer George Spaulding smiled and motioned towards the "Hey, so, the lawyer was all like, "Yeah, we can figure something out." So I sat down and gave him the investigator's report and pics. I was like, I don't think my case will be too hard. I also brought a list of everything me and Vicky own and how we got it. And I have our prenup, which says how we'll split stuff and who gets the kids. I just want a divorce because cheating and splitting up with a prenup, I'm worried Jasmine's situation is gonna be a bit messier. I gave my lawyer the papers I brought to prove my divorce, then I kicked back in my chair and waited for him to go through them. After he finished up, Jasmine gave him pretty much the same stuff for her own case, except she didn't have a prenup. The lawyer broke down the whole divorce process, how long it would take, and how much it would cost. So, we talked about what Jasmine would ask for in her divorce if she could, and then he was like, "I think I need a break for now. I gotta go through all the paperwork and the investigator's report. If I have any questions, I'll give you a ring. If not, I'll just get everything ready and move on. Do you want me to just drop off the papers or give you a heads up first?" Jasmine and I wanted a heads up when the documents were good to go. After that, we left the office and went back to our stuff, agreeing to keep in touch. 2 days later, George Spaulding. So George called me after the small talk and was like, "Don, I checked out everything you gave me and I gotta say, this is the weirdest case I've ever seen. I even had 2 of my buddies look at it and they agreed. Yeah, there was some cheating going on, but damn man, it's pretty clear that the woman is head over heels for you. It doesn't even seem like an affair, more like some messed up game where they had to hook up to keep playing. Don, you really want to keep going with this scam? I mean, from what you've told me, it's almost like it. Man, you guys had a perfect relationship, no fights, great sex life, and you both seemed to really care for each other. But now, Don, it's like you're getting caught up in the drama too. Your only option seems to be getting a divorce. Can't you just talk to Vicky and work things out? I heard the tapes where she told Steve that their relationship was just a game to her. I sat down and really thought about it, and eventually I said to myself, no way, George. I asked myself the same question. I was wondering one day if I could handle it if they were just fooling around and not actually having sex, just pretending to be in a romantic relationship. At first, I thought maybe Vicky was just mad because I laughed at her for thinking she could cheat and get away with it. She couldn't handle it when I told her there's no such thing as a smart cheater and that cheaters always get caught eventually if they take that final step and sleep with someone else. Man, I might have let it slide if she hadn't been cheating for so damn long. I mean, 6 years. Even if the sex was trash and they weren't getting as much enjoyment as Jasmine and I, it's still cheating. She's gotta face the consequences. George sighed and said, "It's your life, but I hate having to do this to you." He's got the paperwork ready to go, when do you want her to find out? I grinned and replied, well, George and Steve are on the East Coast this week, so it's gotta be now. Hey, I'll be back late on Friday afternoon. Can we let her know at work on Friday? I think her plane lands at noon, so she should be in her office around 3:30 or 4. I want her to be told and given the tape I have for her. It's a snippet of her conversation with Steve discussing the breakup. You can listen to it, but at the end I mentioned that they got caught. Like I said, cheaters always mess up and get caught. On Friday morning, I gathered all my crew in my office before they went to their work sites. So me and Vicky are splitting up, and I told them not to listen to her or spill any more beans about business or my personal life. Laura, my secretary, was like, "Oh man, I can't believe Vicky would pull something like that. I remember how much she hates backstabbers." Laura chuckled and kept going, talking about all the shady stuff Vicky used to say about people we knew. Then, at 4:10, my lawyer called me about the documents. I got served around 4:30 that day, and then I got the call I was dreading. I saw it was Vicky on the caller ID, so I answered and said hi. Vicky was crying, and then she said in a soft, shaky voice, "Don, can't we just move on? I love you so much. I know I messed up, but you really annoyed me that night when you were lecturing me like you're better than everyone. For the first year, all we did was plan. We only met up to prove we could. You heard me telling Steve I didn't love him and the sex wasn't even that great. We were going to stop. Please don't do this to me. I can't believe you found out after all these years, Vicky. I didn't do this to us, you did. Now I have to end it. I thought we were both on the same page about cheating and affairs, damn it. I knew neither of us would approve. So we both know you were cheating, and honestly, karma's a bitch. I'm just baffled at how you could do something like that and not feel guilty. I felt bad for Vicky, so I decided to spill the beans about your little affair. I never planned on telling you how I found out, but now I think I will. You were kinda right about not going to Denver together that Thursday before you came back. I was at the office and Jasmine. So, Sloane came in and asked us to build a deck and do some landscaping in her backyard. She let me use Steve's office, and I saw a picture of you with him and the trophy his car won at the State Classic Chevrolet. She said you were one of his ex-girlfriends, but I almost believed it until I saw that you looked pretty recent in the photo. Plus, you were wearing jewelry and clothes that I know are only about 2 years old. I was almost ready to put my worries aside and think that you guys were dating before we got together. So, me and Jasmine were at this car show and bumped into this guy. I was thinking of changing my mind about him, but then we found out you guys were both in Denver that week. We decided to hire a detective to keep an eye on you. We watched you for a month, and apart from one dance at a party, you guys didn't have any contact. We were about to stop snooping around and just chalk it up to a coincidence that you happened to see Steve and take a picture with him. By then, Jasmine and I. So we were talking and sharing stuff about you, and I remembered she mentioned Steve was gonna be in San Antonio and you said you'd be in Austin. We decided to keep tabs on you this week, and if we didn't find anything, we were gonna drop it. But we did find something, didn't we? I heard some sniffling in the background, then Vicky said, Don, I love you so much. I don't want to lose you. Can't you please forgive me, just this once? I sighed and replied, No, honey, I just can't. Sorry, but I can't do it right now. I probably could have if you didn't cheat on me, but I just can't get past the fact that you slept with him and how long you were seeing each other. But babe, can't you see that it wasn't really a serious relationship? It was more like a game for me, just to see if I could do it. The sex. Well, we were away from home and super horny, so it was like we were using each other to get off. We didn't make love, and I don't think we ever said, I love you to each other. We were into each other, always just having fun, and then for the past 4 years, it was mostly just about hooking up. Vicky, it doesn't matter now. All that matters is that you did it. You wanted to turn me into a fool, and you did it. You were supposed to meet Steve somewhere and ended up hooking up with him. I wouldn't be surprised if this happened at one of your friends' parties, right? Vicky sighed and said, Yes, Don, that's how it was back then. We were just chatting, and then he came up to the table and asked me to dance with the girls. Me and my friend were chatting about this couple we saw at the bar who were fighting with each other. I mentioned our usual joke about clever cheaters and how they don't exist. While we were dancing, I filled Steve in on our conversation and our beliefs. When he escorted me back to our table, he casually suggested, I bet we could pull off that same trick. I'm always on the road, and if I found someone who did the same, we could meet up in a different city and have a fling without getting caught. We danced a few more times that night and decided to give it a shot. So, I found out that he was traveling for work, and he found out I was doing a review. We talked and realized we'd be in the same place in 3 weeks, so we decided to meet up. We started planning our perfect non-romantic relationship at that meeting. We agreed not to call each other at home or on our regular phones, mostly using burner phones and calling from work during lunch to plan our next meetups. We even got fake IDs and I got a new credit card. Hey, I put the card in the mailbox by my parents' house and sent the bill. You know I always check the flag there regularly. We've sorted everything out except for the photography. I had no clue he still had it. Vicky smiled sadly and said, I think like we always said, one slip up and the traitor will be caught. I'm really sorry, babe. I guess I got too caught up in the drama. I love you. I heard a click when Vicky hung up. Tears started rolling down my face. I sat back in my chair and thought to myself, I never knew. When Laura said goodnight to me, the next thing I remember is how I freaked out because it was already dark outside before making the final call on getting a divorce. At different times, both sets of parents tried to talk me out of divorcing Vicky. Maybe the most heartfelt plea came from her parents. One Saturday, they called me up and asked if they could swing by my place to see the kids. Of course, I said yes. After they spent some time with the kiddos, the three of us adults sat in the lounge chairs by the pool in the shade, keeping an eye on the kids splashing around in the pool. Vicky's mom was there too. Yo, she turned to me and was like, Don, we all know that my daughter totally embarrassed herself when she came to our house that first night. She was a wreck and wouldn't tell us what was wrong, she was just freaking out saying she had messed everything up. We finally got her to calm down enough to spill the whole story. She showed us all the proof you had on her. Dawn, I gotta admit, if I caught her dad doing what she did, I would have left him too. But can't you just do what I'm telling you instead of what I would do? I know she loves you. Man, I can tell she's really got it bad for you. Every time she looks at you, talks about you, or even sees a photo of you, it's like she can't help herself. Her problem is that she's too damn smart for her own good. She's always been used to being the top dog intellectually, and now she's got to prove she can handle a situation like this. Did you ever stop to think that maybe you pushed her into this? She mentioned that argument you two had about friends, and right after that she decided to show she could have an affair without getting caught. I looked at my mother-in-law and just said, yes, Mona, I get it. Man, I thought I might have played a part in her cheating. I mean, I told her that if she had just met the guy and they didn't hook up, I could have forgiven it. But she went ahead and did it, you know. We both admitted we were cheaters before we tied the knot. And she was so insistent on adding clauses about infidelity to our prenup. And then she goes and does this. It's killing me, but I can't just let it go. The divorce is finalized now, and for once I'm glad we had that prenup. So basically, me and Vicky had an agreement where we had some investments together because my business was under the family's name. The house we owned together was also part of the deal. I gave Vicky the value of her share in the house from the investment account so I could own it completely. Even though I was always kind to Vicky and never made a fuss about her seeing the kids, I still couldn't trust her anymore. It's a shame, but that's just how it is. So, I was taking the kids out to dinner, right? And then Jasmine walks in and she looks all lost and confused. The hostess goes up to her and asks how many people she's with, and Jasmine just holds up one finger. I jump up from my seat and stop the hostess before she leads Jasmine to her table. Hey Jasmine, nice to see you. I say. I saw you telling Patty you were alone. If you want, we can all sit together. Jasmine looks at me, smiles, and says, sure. I felt my heart lift and the room lit up when she came towards me, giving me a quick hug and a kiss on the cheek. Thank you, she said. I think I'm gonna enjoy this. I've been so lonely since it. After Jasmine sat down, I introduced her to my kids. Before she even looked at the menu, my dad piped up, Don, you hiding something from me? Who's this pretty lady? I chuckled and Jasmine grinned. I turned to my dad, saying, Dad, this is Jasmine Sloan. Her husband, her mom was Donita Horton, they used to come here a lot when I was a kid. Mr. Patterson smiled and said, oh yes, now I remember you. You look so much like your mom that I can't believe I didn't recognize you. How are your parents? I haven't seen them in years. Jasmine looked at Mr. Patterson and said, I guess they are both doing okay. Sometimes I talk to my dad on the phone. After the divorce, he moved to Kansas City. I see my mom a few times a month. She lives north of the city. Well, I hope you have a good one. Hey, I hope you'll start coming back here more often now that you remember where we are. After Jasmine placed her order, I asked her how she's doing. I wish I had called more, but summer is always crazy busy for me. I know, I probably used that as an excuse, but I could have made time. I'm really sorry. Oh, don't be silly, Jasmine said. I know you're busy, and I didn't call you either. Actually, I'm here tonight to celebrate. Steve finally gave in, and today my divorce was finalized. We had to sell the house and we decided to split everything evenly, but because of that, he got mad and fought against paying child support and getting a divorce. However, since he was the one who didn't want me to work, I ended up winning. I had to move into a crappy little apartment, but once I find a job, I'll move into a better place. After we ate, the kids started getting restless. Jasmine and I chatted and even ordered another bottle of wine. Finally, I told Jasmine that I should probably leave before those two jerks kick me out of here. It was great catching up with you again, maybe we can hang out like this again sometime. Jasmine smiled and nodded, saying, I would like that, I can afford it. She called the waitress over and asked for the bill. The waitress smiled and said both bills were paid. I laughed and said, that old bastard, I usually cry and he knows it. I think he's trying to set us up. I reached into my wallet, put the appropriate tip on the table, then stood up. Come on, kids, go say goodnight to your grandparents and let's go home. I helped Jasmine up from her chair and offered her my hand. Shall we? Let me walk you to your ride, my lady, I said. Jasmine smiled, took my hand, and replied, you can, sir. As we waited for the kids to come back, I turned to Jasmine and confessed, I don't want this night to end. Before you showed up, I was hoping to make it home in time to chill by the pool and unwind. All I wanted was to spend the night alone with the kids. Jasmine looked at me and said, me too, except we don't have a pool in our place and I don't have kids. I reassured her, it's still early, Jasmine. Hey, wanna come hang out with me again once I tuck these two in bed? Jasmine grinned and nodded enthusiastically. She whispered, yes, I'd love that. After the kids were asleep, I filled up the fridge with wine, beer, sodas, and ice. I put it by the pool next to the sun loungers and told Jasmine to help herself. I grabbed a Pepsi and leaned back in my chair. Jasmine also grabbed a Pepsi. As I looked at the sparkling pool in the dim light, I sighed and turned to Jasmine. I said, you know, I think your mom is partly. Hey, Jasmine, I gotta come clean about something, I think I might have been the reason for my divorce. I feel terrible about it, sorry. I was just curious, you know. But when I mentioned it, Jez looked absolutely horrified. I swear, I even saw a tear in her eye. I got up from my seat, struggling a bit, and sat on the edge of Jasmine's chair. I wiped away a tear from her eye and said, let me explain. Turns out, I made a total fool of myself when I was 16. I had only been working at the restaurant for about 3 weeks when your mom showed up with some random guy. They had dinner, and then. So I went to this bar to grab some drinks and dance, right? And let me tell you, I always thought your mom was the most gorgeous woman ever, until I laid eyes on you. I couldn't stop staring at her, and my dad caught me in the act. He even heard me saying I was gonna spill the tea to my friends at school on Monday. Man, I still remember the lecture he gave me that evening in his office. I think that night really shaped my views on loyalty in relationships. And you know what? Later on, Vicky showed up. Working with us, I got the same lecture we used to chat about all the time. We shared our experiences and what we saw in the restaurant. I thought I agreed with my dad's philosophy, maybe. I was too stubborn about loyalty for my own good. But meeting your mom that night changed everything for me. I've been on a tough path ever since. I'm sorry, and no, none of my family or our employees snitched on your mom. I don't know who did it, but it's been almost a year. So, remember that time before your folks split up when she was out with her dude friend at a restaurant? Jasmine turns to me and goes, maybe something good came out of that whole mess, or maybe not, depending on how you see it. Turns out she ended up marrying the guy and they were together until he died in a car crash a few years back. Can't say for sure, but I heard she was cheating on him too. They always say once a cheater, always a cheater, right? Anyway, once Jasmine stopped crying, I knew it was all good. I went back to my seat and we started chatting about some cool stuff. I found out that she had a degree in accounting and had been working in that field for a while. It made me chuckle a bit because it reminded me of my mom always griping about needing more rest but couldn't because she was in charge of the books at the bar and restaurant and also had to keep an eye on the waitstaff. I also thought maybe I should look into getting a nanny for Laura, maybe next Wednesday. I hadn't been home from work for long enough to do anything else. I was just sipping on some water when I heard a knock on the door. I opened it up and got smacked in the chest with something soft but heavy. I looked down and saw Jasmine King all up on me, trying to plant one on me. She was crying and saying thank you over and over. Turns out, my folks had reached out to her and offered her a job. She went through the interview and got hired, starting tomorrow. They are paying her way too much and she couldn't stop crying about it. I just hugged her tight and ran my fingers through her hair. Over the next few months, Jasmine and I got even closer. Me and the kids go out for dinner like 4 or 5 times a week. It seems like we pick different days so the accountant can join us. Then Christmas rolls around and Jasmine gets invited to dinner at the Pattersons. Me and Jasmine both help out with getting ready for the New Year's party at the bar. My dad and siblings are always griping that we are not helping much, but every time they try to find us, we are just hugging and kissing. They say all this stuff, but by then, me and Jasmine are already a solid couple. No matter where we're invited, one of us is always there. Got a message saying it's Valentine's Day again, which means another busy day at the restaurant and bar. Jasmine and I had to work late after most folks cleared out. I headed over to the restaurant area and called Jasmine over to the bar. I was like, hey, can you come over here for a sec? The band's taking a break and I need some help getting on stage. Jasmine was cool with it and said she needed a break from the place anyways. When we got on stage, I asked her to hold the mic stand while I knelt down. I yanked on the thing and yelled, hey, I need some light, can you grab it for me? Jasmine was searching for a light source when suddenly one of the spots lit us both up. I told Jasmine as the mic picked up my voice and blasted it throughout the hall. When she looked down at me, she saw me holding something out for her to take. It was a black square and she thought it might be part of a microphone stand. The light was blinding and she couldn't see well as she reached for the object I was holding. So I was talking to her again and I was like, Jasmine, I'm down here on my knees begging you to marry me. You've brought so much happiness into my life, I'm only truly happy when I'm with you. As soon as Jasmine touched the box, she figured out what I was getting at. She shut the box with her hands and was like, what did you do? Jasmine opened the box and saw this gorgeous ring inside. Her jaw dropped, she gasped, and then she brought her hand to her mouth in shock. She slowly took the ring out of the case. She gave me this look, then started putting the ring on her left ring finger. Tears were flowing down her face as she kneeled down and gave me a long, passionate kiss. She moaned and said, I love you with all my heart. I've been dreaming for months that you would love me too. The room was filled with whistling and cheering as Jasmine came out for a breather. She saw my whole family gathered around and my brother lifted her up and hugged her. Then everyone took turns hugging her and congratulating us, thanking our lucky stars. Jas has been planning her wedding for June. She's been slowly moving her stuff from her small apartment to my place. After the wedding reception, Jas and I opened gifts. At the bottom of the pile, there was an old yellow envelope with a heart-shaped Valentine inside. The signature was erased, but it looked like it could be from me. The Valentine had a message saying, I received this from the only man I've ever loved on our first Valentine's Day together. Hey, I've been holding on to this for a while now and I think it's time I give it to you. It's like I'm passing on a piece of his heart to you. I hope you both have a life full of love and care for each other and that you never hurt each other or let stupid arguments come between you. Congratulations. I wish you both a lifetime of love and happiness. Love, Victoria. Oh, and make sure to subscribe to our channel so your partner doesn't cheat on you again, and go ahead and check out the next story. Yo, this story ain't nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, just forget about even trying to listen to it.